and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fernpate Watson. I am the Director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. I'm looking forward to this conversation because our guest today, Dr. Melony Shemberger, will be providing us with some practical strategy to build a culture for assessment among faculty. Dr. Schemberger, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. So as Dr. Watson indicated, I am Melony Shemberger. I'm an associate professor of mass communication. I started at Murray State in 2013. And in addition to my teaching role and other responsibilities that I have, I'm also the assessment coordinator for the undergraduate programs in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Murray State University.
Thank you, Dr. Schemberger, for giving us, that's a brief introduction of yourself. I know you have a wealth of experience, and today the title of your presentation, or what you'll be sharing about, is building a culture for assessment among faculty. Why should we be even concerned about building a culture? Help us understand what got you interested in this topic and how has it worked for you?
I'm actually going to take you back several years ago. I think I became really intrigued with assessment when I was an education news reporter. I have covered education, I believe more than 20 years, maybe 24 if I remember right, but a long time. And part of my work as an education journalist was when the test scores would be released every fall. So I would write up all the news stories. That was my time to really dig into the data. I love data. I like getting into it. I also liked going into the classrooms to see really what was working for some of the teachers and students. So basically bringing that data to life, and I enjoyed that a lot. And who knew at that time that I would be, now here I am in education, worried about assessment as well. So when I came to Murray State University, let me back up a little bit. Part of my doctoral work I have a doctor of education from Tennessee State University. And part of my doctoral work focused a little bit on assessment, not a whole lot, but just a little bit. So when I come to Murray State University in 2013, got a good year under my belt. And then the following year, my chair at that time sent me an email and asked if I'd be willing to speak with him about a thankless opportunity. I thought, okay, I don't know. He didn't elaborate much more. So when we met on that following Monday, he was getting ready to retire. And so some of the things he was trying to do was dispense with some of his responsibilities. And one of the things that he did was putting together the yearly assessment reports. And he said, you have a doctor of education. I think things like this would be more, not really appropriate. I can't remember exact words he said, but he said, I think this would fit your bill a whole lot better than it would mine. And I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to take it on. And he described the process, what he did. And I'm thinking, there's so much more to assessment than just, here are the results, here's what we're going to do, and there you go. So I decided to really make this role as an undergraduate assessment coordinator for the department really my own. And I really wanted to help my colleagues understand the value and utility of assessment. So that's where I started with this in 2000, and I believe it was in 15. And here I am today, more than 5 years later, created a culture, yes, still building it, but we've come a long way, and I'm really proud of the successes that our department has been able to achieve in assessment.
Right, thank you for sharing. So, Dr. Schemberger, why should faculty and departments who are responsible for assessment really concern themselves about a process or an approach to assessment?
So that was one of the things that I had to do in this role, create a process that everybody had a role to play in this. Assessment is not just a one-person gig. It is something that needs to be shared among everyone in the department. So one of the things that I did was to schedule some workshops with the faculty in which we took our standards, our accreditation standards. My department is accredited by the Accrediting Council for the Education of Journalism and Mass Communication. Long name, so I call it ACE-JMC, but we have 12 standards. So we took those standards and wrote them into student learning outcomes. So we have a 3-year assessment cycle, and each of those years in that 3-year cycle, we are focusing on 4 standards, and then thus 4 student learning outcomes. So I would hold these workshops once a semester, and those worked well, but then I figured, you know, there's still some more immersion that needs to take place for really the idea of assessment to take hold. So then I started with some emails. Faculty get bogged down with emails. And then I started a Canvas course just for our department. Canvas is the learning management system at Murray State University. And so my department now has an assessment course that houses all of our assessment plans back from when I took it on. It also includes many resources, things that I might have done through the Faculty Development Center, articles that I might have written about assessment. It also includes assessment tips. So if there's struggling for an idea, they can go through those assessment ideas and try to choose one or apply it. So I really made it richer. Streamlined it, yes, the process, and really started building the resource in the library that I think that the department needed in order to have kind of a one-stop shop with assessment.
Wow, you have done a number of things. I was just taking notes here for our viewers, just a little recap here. So first of all, you scheduled some workshops with your faculty, and you wrote standards. You used the standards to write the learning outcome, and you were looking at a 3-year cycle, and you focused on the 4 standards or learning outcomes, you said, for that cycle.
Right. So they would. Let me also explain, in our department, we have 5 different programs, and each program has an assessment plan because each program had to have its own student learning outcomes. We couldn't share the same student learning outcome. So what they would do, they would write and when I say they, it's a kind of a mini process involving the curriculum coordinator and then the faculty who teach in that sequence. They would work on it, and then I would take it and make sure, do we have that good operative verb? Is it measurable and observable according to Bloom's? Is this something that we can measure? And then I would just help them to tweak it to make sure it was going to be the way that could be understood.
Right. And then at that point, you recognized that an immersion was still needed, more still needed to be done. And that's where you took it to Canvas. And you were housing all the assessment plans there. You had resources, articles, assessment tips. You basically streamlined the process, giving them a library of resources. I think that's commendable.
It's been a lot of work, that's for sure, but it's been really worthwhile.
So I know you mentioned the Canvas learning management system, but just for the purpose of our viewers, could other types of learning management systems be used as well?
Absolutely. I think whatever LMS your institution uses, whether it's Blackboard or Moodle or maybe even a Google Classroom, whatever you all have, it would definitely work for any LMS.
Yeah. And how has the use of this approach impacted the assessment culture?
That's a good question. So the assessment culture in my department, it continues. In fact, we did have a brief workshop meeting a couple of weeks ago to start planning for the 2020-2021 academic year.
Mhm.
And a colleague did ask, who's looking at these reports exactly? And I said, well, I know that we have a committee on campus who looks at them because we are assessed on the assessment plan. And I'm sure that they are shared with our state education authority, which is the Council on Post-Secondary Education. I said, but regardless of really who looks at it, it's really the utility of this, the process, and it's helping you. So there's still some reminders that I sometimes have to make, in helping colleagues understand that assessment, it's up to you. What are you doing in your classroom that we can really build on? Just because it might be working well one semester, there's still always that opportunity for improvement. And that's how we should view assessment. So sometimes I have to remind, but really the whole process has been much more effective. There was some education that had to take place. I took for granted, for instance, when I started this, that all of my colleagues knew what formative assessment was and what summative assessment was. And they did not know. So, and that's fine. So that was an opportunity to explain more about that. And now it's part of their vernacular. So, so I think it has helped. It's not seen as the dirty 4-letter word that assessment sometimes is regarded as, but I think they have seen how they can really use this as part of their instruction. And then we can build on that year after year.
You have shared some of the practical strategies that you have been doing. And I just imagine that there might be viewers out there listening to this conversation and saying to themselves, perhaps that could work at her university, not mine, or in her department, not mine, or with her colleagues, not mine. So they resonate with what you have shared, but they're still a bit hesitant at this point in terms of the practicality of this for them. What would you say to these viewers? What would be some first steps that they could take?
I think, first of all, I think you do need to work through the reluctancy that there is in assessment. It really just starts with a simple conversation. Many departments have meetings. Maybe that's an opportunity to have an honest discussion about assessment. Perhaps over a cup of coffee. Maybe your department has coffee chats, I don't know, or maybe there's some sort of professional development opportunity that can take place where assessment can enter that conversation. But I do believe that small conversations, that's kind of the way to start. And that's what I did before I really started with workshops and emails, and now where I am today with the Canvas course and still continuing workshops. I did meet with the various curriculum coordinators to find out, what have you been doing? This is what we need to do, et cetera. I was listening to them, they listened to me. So that way we kind of understood the new paths that we were getting ready to take with assessment. So I really think it just starts with just having some simple conversations first. And then maybe can you schedule a workshop where y'all can really have some meaningful time to construct assessment pathways, whatever those might be for you.
So if I'm understanding the flow of our conversation today correctly, it's good to start with just some small conversations about assessment. And then we could move on to workshops. And in your case, a Canvas course really helped. So those 3 things are good places you're thinking in terms of really having a culture of assessment.
Yes, and I do want to emphasize I'll just say the LMS, the learning management system, but really any way that you wanted to organize it. So I do think an organization of plans, of assessment resources, of tips, something that can be structured well in one place so that way faculty have access to that. I do think that is key.
So just to clarify in terms of what happened in the learning management system, was it a self-paced sort of a structure, or was it that faculty could interact with each other?
No, it's pretty much, and really there wasn't much instruction to that. It was more of a storehouse, if you will,
Oh,
where all of those things, but still they're structured. It still took some time to put that together. But that way, you know, they have all of that. They have access to their plans, which I think is also key. Even when our department went through the reaccreditation process in 2000, and I think it was 15 or 16, and we're getting ready, we're preparing for the next cycle now. But I do remember the committee that came to see our program, to see the facilities and talk to us. They were really impressed with the efforts we were making with assessment. That was noted in their findings. So they do believe that assessment and how we aligned it with our accreditation standards, not many programs do that, at least in the ACE JMC member institutions. So they were really, they really commented about that. So it is part of our culture now. So now that we're getting ready for the next reaccreditation cycle, we will have that included, so that way I can show the site committee this is how our assessment process works. You know, so I do think that has been helpful.
That's encouraging, Dr. Schemberger. Thanks for sharing such practical strategies with us. Do you have any resources that you'd like to recommend for our viewers to review?
Absolutely. I have to admit, whenever I have any kind of downtime, so I do read, but the things that I read it's probably not enjoyable reading for many, but for me it is, because this is where I start igniting processes in my mind, and I start really thinking about some things that I could do differently. There are a couple of books that I could recommend. One is Trends in Assessment by it's Hundley and Kahn. This is a 2019 publication. This is really good. It offers some ideas and talks about issues in higher education assessment. And then one that I have used often, and I still turn to it. In fact, I used it not too long ago when I was having to prepare some test questions, was Learning Assessment Techniques by Elizabeth Barkley and Claire Howell Major. And this, it's thick, but it's really worthwhile. It's a good resource as well. And those will give you some wonderful ideas. And it is written for college faculty, so that also helps. I really enjoyed assessment so much that when I took my first course a couple of years ago, I've also returned to the classroom. So I am a graduate student again, working on a master's in instructional design. And the very first course I took was Topics of Methods and Evaluation. We talked about assessment, and we were introduced to a concept known as logic modeling. And I was intrigued by that. So I looked into it and I was like, man, we do a lot of this stuff already that I have worked on. I just didn't realize it was called so much of that, but really it's a visual representation of your process. So I worked on that some more and took that material from the class, expanded it, and published a journal article on logic modeling and the process that we took in our department. You can find that, it's open access, on the Teaching Journalism and Mass Communication Journal. Just Google that and you'll find it, and you'll be able to see that article. It was published summer of 2020.
Yes, and I believe you shared it here in the resources. So viewers, I will be linking to the helpful resources that Dr. Schemberger just mentioned, and that will be in the video description below. So I encourage you to check those out. Wow, Dr. Schemberger, you have really shared some practical strategies and practical resources with us today. I'm wondering if you could leave our viewers with an encouragement or a call to action.
Be patient. And I say that with a lot of love for my colleagues, but be patient, because the assessment process, now that what we have in place, it was not easy to put together.
Mhm.
Um, and not just for them, but then when I even submitted the reports to our institutional effectiveness office, and then I get the feedback, and it was like, oh gosh, we got to do a bunch of different things. It was always a movement of some kind. We were progressing. And really, it wasn't until last year that we finally received the best marks ever. We got a 100 on both our results and our plan. And it was the best feeling. It was a great celebration. So you do have to be patient, because if you're thinking about progressing and trying to build this positive culture of assessment in your department or in your program, it's going to have to take everybody to really get involved with this. But just be patient, be the ringleader, and be the good cheerleader, and and really it will pay off to where it becomes easier, but you're still learning something new each time. And faculty do a lot of great things in the classrooms. It's not really our role as assessment coordinators to change that up. That's not really what we're wanting to do, but we do want to help them think about different ways, possibly, and being given new opportunities and new challenges. And so now it's a great journey. I really enjoy being the assessment coordinator. I do like assessment. So be patient.
I like that. Be patient, and it's a journey.
Exactly.
I often say I value not just the goal but the process.
That's exactly right.
Dr. Schemberger, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Viewers, I encourage you to share this conversation with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.